Welcome to NTD Good Morning. Here are today's top stories. More freezing weather in store for the Eastern U.S. Forecasters predict this cold snap could be the longest in decades. Democrats on Capitol Hill are threatening a partial government shutdown if Republicans don't agree to make changes to ICE policies. We have new details about what exactly they're demanding as some conservatives raise concerns. Also, new videos have emerged showing Alex Preddy, the man shot by immigration agents in Minneapolis, aggressively confronting federal agents more than a week earlier. And later this morning, border czar Tom Homan will be holding his first news conference in Minneapolis. We're going to bring you that live. A car rams repeatedly into a revered Jewish center in New York City as people inside were gathered for prayer. Police say a hate crime investigation is underway. And in Washington, the president headlines a star-studded event to launch the Trump Accounts initiative, something he calls one of the most transformative policy innovations of all time. And NTD's 5th International Photography Competition enters its final round today. We take a look at submissions from all over the world.
This is NTD Good Morning, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here are Stephanie Cox and Carrie Dunst.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. Today, Thursday, January 29th, and of course, this is NTD Good Morning. In today's top news, we're moving first to the weather, now where the cold isn't expected to let up anytime soon. The National Weather Service is warning of dangerously cold temperatures across the Eastern U.S. starting tonight. Now, the extreme cold snap is expected to be one of the longest in decades. Now, the bitter cold is predicted to extend into next week with a fresh surge of frigid air. Forecasters warn daily minimums could be broken across the region, and weather models show a low-pressure system off the Carolinas, and that could develop into what's referred to as a bomb cyclone. Parts of the southeast could start accumulating snow by Saturday. Further inland in Mississippi and Tennessee, the situation grows even more dire after days of icy weather and power outages. Many of these areas are just not equipped for this kind of cold. Dispatchers are fielding calls for medication and oxygen, while troopers are conducting welfare checks on people who haven't been heard from in days. And New York police have launched a hate crime investigation after a disturbing car ramming incident overnight. A man was arrested after repeatedly crashing his vehicle into a deeply revered Hasidic Jewish site. NTD's Daniel Monahan reports.
Videos shared online show a car repeatedly reversing and then smashing headfirst into the Chabad Lubavitch World Headquarters in New York City last night. The frightening incident happened while people were gathered for prayer. It comes at a time of heightened concern within Jewish communities worldwide, following last month's deadly Bondi attack in Australia, where 15 people were killed during a Hanukkah celebration. Police Commissioner Jessica Tisch said the bomb squad responded and conducted a full sweep of the vehicle. No explosive devices were found.
This incident is currently being investigated as a hate crime by the NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force.
New York City's Mayor Zohran Mamdani said he stands in solidarity with the Crown Heights Jewish community.
I am relieved that no one was injured in this horrifying incident. This is deeply alarming, especially given the deep meaning and the history of the institution to so many in New York and around the world.
Mamdani said any threat to a Jewish institution or place of worship must be taken seriously.
Anti-Semitism has no place in our city, and violence or intimidation against Jewish New Yorkers is unacceptable.
Attorney General Letitia James said it was a blessing no one was hurt.
I'm a former city council member who has represented this community in the past, and I know this community very closely and deeply. They are part of my family.
Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights Harmeet Dillon said she has instructed criminal prosecutors to open a civil rights investigation into the attack. Police say the vehicle involved had New Jersey license plates. The driver eventually exited the car wearing shorts, shouting to bystanders that it slipped, and told officers he was trying to park. A Chabad Lubavitch spokesperson said some of the doors were damaged in the crash. The Chabad Lubavitch headquarters and synagogue in Brooklyn's Crown Heights neighborhood has thousands of visitors annually. Its Gothic revival facade is very recognizable to adherents of the Chabad movement and has inspired dozens of replicas across the world. The word Chabad is an acronym for three Hebrew words, Chokhmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Da'at, knowledge, according to Chabad.org. The Jewish religious system is focused on deep faith in the Torah. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
And thanks to Daniel for that report. We're learning more about the man who was recently shot by federal agents in Minneapolis. New videos have emerged which show Alex Preddy aggressively confronting ICE agents more than a week before his death. Meanwhile, President Trump tells Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey that he's, quote, playing with fire after Frey says his city won't enforce federal immigration laws. This as the FBI names a suspect who allegedly shot at Border Patrol agents yesterday in Arizona. NTD correspondent Jason Blair brings us more.
President Trump reacted to a statement by Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey on Tuesday. Trump saying, surprisingly, Mayor Jacob Frey just stated that Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws. This is after having had a very good conversation with him. Could somebody in his inner sanctum please explain that this statement is a very serious violation of the law and that he is playing with fire? Frey's comment came after he had just met with White House border czar Tom Homan regarding immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis. Frey said, I reiterated that my main task is for Operation Metro Surge to end as quickly as possible. And then later, I also made it clear that Minneapolis does not and will not enforce federal immigration laws and that we will remain focused on keeping our neighbors and streets safe. After Trump's post, Frey responded within the hour saying, the job of our police is to keep people safe, not enforce federal immigration laws. I want them preventing homicides, not hunting down a working dad who contributes to Minneapolis and is from Ecuador. Everyone should feel safe calling 911. White House Rapid Response responded, no one is asking you to enforce federal immigration laws. We're just asking you to honor ICE detainers and let them know when criminal illegal immigrants are in your jail so they can safely pick them up and deport them. President Trump sent Tom Homan to Minnesota on Monday to start dialogues with leaders to address ongoing tensions involving ICE operations. And the FBI names a suspect involved in a shooting with Border Patrol agents in rural Arizona on Tuesday.
It involves an individual who was involved in human trafficking from an earlier incident. They recognized his vehicle, made a traffic stop.
Authorities say the suspect fled on foot and then started shooting at a Border Patrol helicopter.
The subject continued to flee on foot while being pursued by CBP agents who returned fire. The subject was shot. Patrick Gary Schlegel, age 34, and a resident of Arizona, is currently in federal custody.
Schlegel is currently recovering after being treated for his injuries. No one else was injured in the incident.
In this case, we believe our agent in USBP, that agent acted lawfully.
Jason Blair, NTD News.
Thanks to Jason for that report. And Attorney General Pam Bondi says 16 people were arrested in Minnesota yesterday for allegedly assaulting, resisting, or impeding law enforcement. Bondi says she expects more arrests to follow. And later this morning, border czar Tom Homan will be holding his first news conference from Minneapolis, where he's expected to address the immigration operations in the state. Stay tuned. We'll be bringing that to you live here on NTD Good Morning. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said in an interview yesterday that he would never run for office again. He's currently serving his second term as governor of Minnesota. He was first elected in 2018 after serving 6 terms in the House of Representatives. The Trump administration has recently singled out Walz and Minnesota over these allegations of massive fraud in the state. And a partial government shutdown looms on Capitol Hill. Democrats have laid out their demands to change immigration enforcement to avert another shutdown. Some Republicans are open to holding off on ICE funding, while others warn against it. NTD's Melania Weisskopf reports.
Senate Democrats once again making demands of Republicans to avert a second partial government shutdown. Funding for 6 federal agencies runs out tomorrow. This time, Democrats are demanding changes to how ICE conducts immigration enforcement.
First, we want to end roving patrols. We need to tighten the rules governing the use of warrants and require ICE's coordination with state and local law enforcement.
They also want to hold federal agents to the same use of force policies that apply to state and local law enforcement. And they want to force immigration agents to wear body cameras and to remove masks. Democrats are calling on Republicans to separate DHS funding from the broader spending package to make the changes. These demands so far rejected by Republican leadership, though party leaders indicate negotiations are possible.
So we're anxious to hear what their demands are, what their requests are, what their asks are. I think the administration is willing to sit down with them and have a discussion, perhaps a negotiation about how do we move forward. But the one thing I do know, and that is that a government shutdown is not in anybody's interest.
Thune intends to hold a vote on the entire package as is, the first vote scheduled for later this morning. If the package fails to get the 60 votes needed due to lack of Democrat support, Thune has not closed the door on taking out DHS funding for now. But this could spell trouble in the House.
If the bill changes much from what the House already passed, then you've got another steep hill to climb over there. All of this just drags things out and delays us funding the government.
A group of House Republicans from the conservative House Freedom Caucus already warned that if senators remove DHS funds, they will not approve the final package, insisting they are, quote, not going to let Chuck Schumer defund Homeland Security to protect criminal illegal aliens. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Melania Weisskopf, NTD News.
And President Trump has chosen a head for the Justice Department's new dedicated fraud enforcement division. The president yesterday nominated Colin McDonald as the division's first assistant attorney general. In a Truth Social post yesterday, Trump said McDonald is a tough, smart, and highly respected America First federal prosecutor. McDonald has worked as an associate deputy attorney general since last year. Before that, he worked under Deputy AG Todd Blanche. In a post on X yesterday, Blanche called McDonald a rock star who was instrumental in helping make America safe again. Earlier this month, Trump said the newly created division was created to combat the pervasive problem of fraud by enforcing federal law against fraud schemes across the country. The division will enforce criminal and civil law against fraud targeting federal government programs, federally funded benefits, businesses, nonprofits, and private citizens nationwide. Its creation comes after the Department of Justice uncovered alleged fraud schemes in Minnesota worth billions. And the administrator of the Centers for Medicare Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, says Los Angeles is at the center of billions of dollars in hospice and home care fraud. His statements drawing a sharp response from California Governor Gavin Newsom. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
So you can see these are medical buildings.
The administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, Dr. Mehmet Oz, said in a video on Tuesday that Los Angeles County is what he called an epicenter for healthcare fraud in America. Oz attributes the fraud to the Russian and Armenian mafia, who he said seemed to have taken over the system.
In this 4-block area in Los Angeles, there are 42 hospices. So either there are a lot of people dying here, or you've got a fraudulent activity that is so good that everyone wants to get in on it.
This is sort of an organized crime, mafia deal where you've got folks who have systemically recruited doctors to write false prescriptions.
Governor Gavin Newsom's office hit back Tuesday saying, quote, amazing to watch Dr. Oz play as a fraud fighter for an effort the state launched years ago. The video comes 3 weeks after Oz and the Justice Department announced a federal investigation into medical fraud in California.
The U.S. Attorney, the FBI, everyone's now focused on the fact that in this state, which has about $30 billion worth of home and community-based services, most of it might be fraudulent.
Meanwhile, Newsom's office has said that he signed legislation in October 2021 to curb medical fraud and abuse, particularly in the hospice industry, which came after a Los Angeles Times investigation reported what it called widespread fraud and abuse in the California hospice industry. Oz said President Trump is not going to tolerate fraud in California anymore.
Unfortunately, in California, there has not been a lot of attention on these problems. That's going to change.
Arlene Richards, NTD News.
Coming up, the FBI searches a Georgia elections office tied to the 2020 vote as the Justice Department presses for ballot records. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announces talks with Denmark and Greenland aimed at strengthening Arctic security. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer kicking off his first official visit to China. This as pressure mounts over the communist regime's spy activities and human rights violations. We're going to have all that and more. We'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. The FBI executed a search warrant yesterday at a Fulton County elections office outside of Atlanta. The search comes amid ongoing scrutiny of Fulton County's handling of the 2020 presidential election. President Trump has long argued that the election improprieties in Georgia contributed to his loss in the state. Last month, the Department of Justice filed a lawsuit against Fulton County. They're seeking access to voting records from the 2020 election. County officials had previously said records were under seal and that they could not be released without a court order. The lawsuit stems from a July resolution passed by Georgia's state election board, which called on the state attorney general to ensure compliance with voting transparency requirements. And President Trump yesterday warning Iran that time is running out to strike a nuclear deal. And in Washington, the Treasury Department hosted a high-profile event to launch the Trump Accounts initiative. NTD's Washington correspondent Mariotsu has more.
President Trump with a harsh warning for Iran, telling them to make a nuclear deal or threatening that its next strike on Iran will be, quote, far worse. President Trump urging that time is running out, that time is, quote, truly of the essence. Tehran then responding with threats, saying that it might strike the U.S., Israel, or any other places that support them. This is coming as President Trump has repeatedly threatened to intervene if Iran continues to kill anti-regime protesters. Take a look.
And in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity in Operation Midnight Hammer. You saw that. And they were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see.
He warns that the fleet headed toward Iran is larger than the one that was sent to Venezuela and says it's ready to rapidly fulfill its mission. Meanwhile, a day after hitting the road to tout his economic agenda in Iowa, President Trump's headlining a summit in Washington to formally launch what he calls one of the most transformative policy innovations of all time.
We're going to put $3 to $4 trillion of wealth into the hands of young Americans who otherwise would have really started out with nothing. For the first time ever, we're going to give every newborn American child a financial stake in the future, head start at life, and a fair shot at the American dream.
With these Trump accounts, the federal government deposits $1,000 for eligible babies born between 2025 and 2028 with tax-free growth until withdrawn at age 18, when the account will function like a traditional IRA. Bank of America and J.P. Morgan Chase pledging to match that $1,000 contribution to their employees while the president celebrates surge in stocks.
And just this morning, as I'm running out, I see the S&P 500 hit 7,000 for the first time ever.
The answer to more socialism is more capitalism. This makes every child in America a capitalist from birth.
The star-studded event, including rapper Nicki Minaj, announcing she'll contribute hundreds of thousands to fund her fans' Trump accounts, and investor Kevin O'Leary, among other Wall Street giants, joining a growing list of those matching deposits.
I am probably the president's #1 fan. He has a lot of force behind him, and God is protecting him. Amen.
I really think that this is how a country heals itself. When it's broken and when Social Security is being questioned and the future of it being questioned.
Rebecca Lichtwerk, chair of Moms for America, sharing personal testimony on what the accounts mean to her as a mother, alongside Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt and actress Cheryl Hines.
This investment in their future is hope. It touches my heart that he's doing this because he understands what it will do for their future. And God has him in this place. He's given President Trump the ability to understand all of these issues in the homes in America. And he's doing this for us, and it's an absolute blessing.
Thanks to Mari for that report. And Visa is making it easier for customers to add a new federal savings program for their children. Visa said yesterday its credit card holders in the U.S. will soon be able to deposit rewards directly into Trump accounts. These accounts are part of a savings and investment program introduced under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Visa CEO Ryan McInerney says it offers a way to turn rewards into savings to help families save for their children's future through everyday spending. And talks underway to strengthen security in the Arctic. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said yesterday that technical discussions between the United States, Denmark, and Greenland have begun.
I think we're going to get something positive done. We're going to begin that process in a very professional, straightforward way. It begins today, and it'll be a regular process. We're going to try to do it in a way that isn't like a media circus every time these conversations happen, because we think that creates more flexibility on both sides to arrive at a positive outcome.
The Secretary of State says the working group aims to counter threats from Russia and China, and it was created earlier this month during a meeting including Rubio, Vice President J.D. Vance, and the foreign ministers of Denmark and Greenland. Rubio projected confidence they will wind up in a good place. The initiative comes after President Trump has said the U.S. must secure Greenland to increase national security against Russia and China. And staying with Marco Rubio, he testified before the Senate yesterday on the U.S. involvement in Venezuela. Lawmakers also pressed him on several crises worldwide, and our Washington correspondent Luis Eduardo Martinez has the details.
I certainly agree with the chairman in terms of his comments relative to Nicolas Maduro. He was bad for Venezuela, he was bad for the region, and he was bad for the United States.
President Trump's actions against narco-terrorists and his capture of Maduro have made America safer. Every American should be thanking Donald Trump and Marco Rubio for what they have done.
Democrat and Republican senators applauded the Trump administration's execution of Operation Absolute Resolve, which resulted in the capture of Nicolás Maduro in Venezuela.
For the first time in 20 years, we are having serious conversations about eroding and eliminating the Iranian presence, the Chinese influence, the Russian presence as well.
Secretary Rubio outlined a process of political stabilization that would culminate in the transition to put to an end the regime in Venezuela and restore democracy.
We are dealing with people over there that have spent most of their lives living in a gangster paradise. And we are certainly better off today in Venezuela than we were 4 weeks ago. And I think and hope and expect that we'll be better off in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months than we would have been had Maduro still been there.
Senators also pressed Secretary Rubio on the Trump administration's stance towards NATO.
And I am asking you to do everything you can to reinforce our commitment to NATO.
NATO needs to be reimagined as well in terms of the obligations. And this is not new to this president. Multiple presidents have complained about it. I think this president just complains about it louder than other presidents. And one of the things we've explained to our allies in NATO is the United States is not simply focused on Europe. We also have defense needs in the Western Hemisphere. We have defense needs in the Indo-Pacific.
Secretary Rubio warned the Iranian regime against future crackdowns against protesters and urged the regime to commit to political and economic reform.
The protests may have ebbed, but they will spark up again in the future because this regime, unless they are willing to change and or leave, have no way of addressing the legitimate and consistent complaints of the people of Iran who deserve better.
It is important to note that after Operation Absolute Resolve, crucial Venezuelan oil shipments to the communist Cuban regime have stopped. And after the Trump administration applied pressure on the Mexican government, Mexican oil shipments have been canceled to the communist Cuban regime as well. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
Thanks to Luis for that report. And British Prime Minister Keir Starmer kicked off his first ever visit to communist China yesterday alongside an entourage of business leaders. This comes as concerns mount over the Chinese Communist Party's espionage activities, as well as its repression of human rights. NTD's Sam Wong has more.
They say that 8 days is a long time in politics. Try 8 years.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Beijing on Wednesday for a 3-day state visit. He's the first UK Prime Minister to go to China since Theresa May in 2018. The communist regime is considered a major trading partner for the United Kingdom, but that relationship soured in recent years due to concern about espionage, Beijing's support for Russia in its war with Ukraine, and the regime's repression of pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong. Traveling with a delegation of business leaders, Starmer is slated to visit Shanghai and meet with Chinese Communist Party leader Xi Jinping.
Of course, we will have to manage our differences, but that's what you do with a mature, consistent, comprehensive and strategic approach to China. We manage our differences, we take our opportunities, and we constantly think, how does this deliver for people back at home?
Aside from building ties with China, Starmer is coming under pressure to help secure the release of British citizen Jimmy Lai, a former media tycoon and one of Hong Kong's most prominent pro-democracy figures. Lai was arrested in 2020 by CCP authorities and is facing a potential sentence of life in prison.
It is outrageous that any British Prime Minister should go to Beijing whilst a British citizen is incarcerated, languishing, along with many pro-democracy campaigners in jails in Hong Kong and in mainland China.
And just shortly before Starmer's China visit, the UK government approved a new supersized Chinese embassy in central London. That's despite pressure from lawmakers over national security concerns. The decision drew protest, with critics warning the embassy could be used as a CCP outpost to intimidate and spy on Chinese dissidents in exile.
This site will accommodate hundreds more Chinese state employees. We know what that means. More interference, more influence operations, and more intimidations of people like me.
Meanwhile, a recent report by The Telegraph says a Chinese spying operation has been hacking the phones of senior UK officials for years. Ahead of Starmer's visit, more than a dozen organizations issued a joint letter urging the Prime Minister to raise the issue of forced organ harvesting. It's a crime committed by the CCP against prisoners of conscience, including groups like Falun Gong practitioners and the Uyghur ethnic minority. When asked whether he would raise human rights issues with Beijing, Starmer did not go into specifics, but said that he would, quote, raise the issues that need to be raised. Sam Wang, NTD News.
And staying with China, the removal of two top generals by regime leader Xi Jinping has created much speculation on the internal power struggles and how they could affect regional security. Joining us now is Rod D. Martin. He's a geopolitical analyst and founder and CEO of Martin Capital. Rod, it's good to see you. Thanks for joining. Of course, everybody now has heard about the removal of these two generals. What's your understanding, though, of what's happening behind the scenes in Beijing?
Well, it's very clear that the Western media is confused as usual about all of this, and it's easy to understand why. It's all very confusing. Totalitarian regimes don't really do transparency. But it seems pretty clear if you look at this over the last year, and for that matter, over the last several years, that this is a rolling purge. And that purge is not about corruption. That purge is a power struggle between what seems pretty clearly at this point to be Xi Jinping and his faction and Zhang Youxia, the highest ranking general in the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, who, we all here are best friends. But that's clearly not the case. And we have seen purge and what seems to be counter purge now all year long, really reaching a frenzy in October, just before the Party Congress, when you lose 9 senior Chinese military leaders in a day. It's just extraordinary. And a lot of those men seem to be allies of Xi. Well, now we have what looks like a reprisal with Zhang and his chief deputy in custody. We don't know where that goes, but it's very dangerous.
And Rod, for people who don't really understand the concept of factions due to not having a sort of an open political process, as you kicked off by saying, how can somebody from the outside begin to understand what the factions are, how many there are, and sort of what makes Xi unique, really, since Mao Zedong?
Well, he is. And a lot of this looks like echoes of the Cultural Revolution. Xi is consolidating power the best he can and has been from the beginning of his time, including extending the term limit so that he could continue to serve beyond what had become customary prior to his reign. He is creating a cult of personality, has been for quite some time, has really gotten rid of everybody in the entire government, not just the military, who could possibly be a challenge to him or a logical successor. The net result of that is that there are hardly any competent people in senior leadership. This is one of the dangerous things about losing Zhang. it seems from all intents that it's actually the military that is hesitant about invading Taiwan. They understand the real limitations of the Chinese military. They understand what they're facing if they try to cross the Formosa Strait. Xi Jinping does not seem to. He seems to be a gambler. And the fact that he keeps purging people who can really hurt him in his government, people who can fight back, tells you that gambler instinct is there, and it makes it very dangerous for a confrontation with Taiwan, with Japan, and with the United States.
Rod, I'd like to explore that point a bit further. It seems as if this survival mode, almost like a cockroach, they just always know how to survive. The party protects itself, and when it feels like there's a boil in civil unrest, especially from the economy and potentially some of the tariffs that Trump is imposing, putting more pressure on the economy, that the party maybe backs away from military aggression against Taiwan. Are you saying potentially that she sees opportunity to consolidate and squash any civil unrest through military action in Taiwan?
Look, my assessment continues to be that an invasion of Taiwan is relatively low probability, not because Beijing doesn't want to do it, but because Beijing knows that it's a very high-risk operation. But in line with what you're saying, in this situation, it might make sense to Xi, especially with yes men around him now, really almost exclusively. It might make sense to him to try something that a different group of leaders did not that long ago. That would be the Argentine junta, the generals who ran Argentina in the 70s and early 80s. They invaded the Falkland Islands, assuming it would be a walkover, assuming Britain was much too far away to do anything about it. Margaret Thatcher sent an armada to the South Atlantic, booted them out, and in a matter of months, all of those generals were in prison, and you had a democracy in Argentina. I think Zhang Youxia understands that example better than Xi Jinping, and I think that Xi might actually think he can gamble and pull something off that Zhang would try to dampen. So I don't think that's going to happen, but there's a much increased danger today as opposed to a month ago.
And Rod, I want to get your view on how President Trump's move on Venezuela and his pressure on Iran is changing the calculus for Xi. Does it embolden him to try something with Taiwan, or does it potentially, seeing the effectiveness of the U.S. operation, does it make him think twice?
I think it definitely gave the PLA some pause. I mean, they understand. They may not understand exactly all of the details of how we did what we did, but they understand what we did. And it's really remarkable. It's quite extraordinary in history. And so I think it gave them pause. I think it might embolden Xi. And more to the point, it cuts off some options for him. He's really got to make a decision now. Is he going to lean into the export-driven economy that the CCP has built for China, which requires good relations with the United States, to a lesser degree Europe, but certainly the U.S., because our consumer market is absolutely essential to their not going into a depression? Or is he going to try to break out of that in a moment where our disruption of the shadow fleet potentially cuts off his ability to buy 90% of Iran's oil and buy most of Russia's oil and gas? And so he's got a decision to make here. I actually think it will probably work out in a positive direction, but I am very concerned about the elevated risk.
Does seem as if we're moving toward an inflection point. The removal of both of these two generals certainly shows that Xi is making moves behind the scenes. Appreciate you sharing your insights with us, Rod Martin. Good to see you.
And you.
And next, a Colombian airline says 15 people are dead after a plane crash in the South American country. The airline says the small turboprop plane crashed yesterday near the border with Venezuela. Unfortunately, everyone on board was killed, including a local lawmaker and a candidate for Congress. The airline says the plane's final contact with air traffic control came minutes after takeoff. Officials did not provide a cause for the crash, but said that there would be a full investigation. An investigator said yesterday authorities were gathering evidence regarding the aircraft, flight operations, as well as the adverse weather conditions at the crash site. Coming up, families gather in Washington, D.C. to honor the 67 victims of a midair collision last year. What authorities say they're doing to prevent future tragedies like this one. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. Families are paying their respects to the 67 people who died in that mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. last year. The families of the victims gathered yesterday to honor their loved ones and demand change. Here's more on that.
On Wednesday evening, the families of 67 people who died in an aircraft collision last January gathered in Washington, D.C. Today, January 29th, marks 1 year since their loved ones died in America's worst aviation disaster in over 2 decades. On that day, an American Airlines jet and an Army Black Hawk helicopter collided over the Potomac River near Reagan National Airport.
Tonight, we gather to honor the 67 lives lost, 67 people who were deeply loved and who are deeply missed every single day.
The memorial came a day after investigators testified about years of ignored warnings and near misses. Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy was present at the gathering yesterday. He praised the families for pressing forward with their demand for accountability.
And you made a choice to pay it forward in a way that some other family wouldn't have to go through what your family went through. And you channeled it into positive energy to make a difference.
Among those killed last January were some of the country's most promising young skaters, as well as their parents and coaches traveling home after training camp.
While we were powerless in that moment to help our loved ones, we were not powerless to help each other. So that's what we did. And we've been doing that ever since.
The mayor of Alexandria, Virginia, Aaliyah Gaskins, announced a memorial plaque would be established on the Potomac River. Officials honored the first responders who rushed to the crash site that day, many plunging into the freezing river in an attempt to save lives. At a hearing on Tuesday, investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board testified there was no single cause for the crash, but that a number of failures led to the disaster. The board's chairwoman, Jennifer Homendy, said the crash was 100% preventable.
But those of us in the aviation community must be unafraid to acknowledge that these systemic failures that led to this tragedy are ours to fix, even if they predate us.
The NTSB has made several recommendations to prevent similar tragedies from happening in the future. Chief among them is a bill that will require aircraft to have advanced locator systems to help prevent collisions. It's something the board has been pushing for years. Senator Ted Cruz from Texas says the bill is close to final passage.
And our hearts and prayers are with all of those who were affected by that tragic crash last year. Moving on, 1 year after the devastating Palisades fire, lawmakers are demanding accountability. A Senate investigation is now examining leadership decisions, water failures, and whether warning signs were missed. NTD's Christina Corona has more from yesterday's Senate hearing.
It's been more than a year since the Palisades fire devastated parts of Southern California, and lawmakers are demanding answers. A Senate committee is investigating what went wrong. In November, Senator Rick Scott toured the burn zone and described the destruction.
I went down to see the Palisades, and I was just shocked. I mean, there was just block after block, there was nothing. There was burnt-out homes, and there was nothing happening. When the fire broke out, fire hydrants were dry. How in God's green earth could that happen? Right? It wasn't firefighters who did that. The reservoirs were empty. The mayor was missing in action.
Fire officials testified the Palisades fire may have been preventable.
The fire that began on January 1st, known as the Lockman Fire, was never fully extinguished. It became a holdover fire, a well-known and predictable hazard.
Another major focus was water infrastructure. Testimony revealed at least one key reservoir sat empty for 11 months.
Again, who missed it? Again, it was missed on multiple fronts. It was missed by the Department of Water themselves by not being able to state that they have reservoirs empty. It was missed by the fire department by not asking the questions, are all systems online? It was missed by the Southern California Edison. All of the utility companies should be coming together, having this conversation.
Witnesses also criticized leadership decisions, including the lack of pre-deployed fire resources. Crawford said the after-action report was intentionally softened and failed to identify who made the decision not to pre-deploy fire engines.
The main part of this investigation is to expose what happened, name names, identify the incompetence so it doesn't happen again.
However, Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal urged the federal government to release more disaster aid. Last month, Governor Gavin Newsom requested $33 billion in federal funding for Los Angeles wildfire recovery. Officials say this will be an ongoing investigation. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And up ahead, NTD's 5th International Photography Competition enters its final round today. We take a look at the submissions that have come in from all over the world. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. Carrie Dunst here. First Lady Melania Trump rang the opening bell at the New York Stock Exchange yesterday. The First Lady made some remarks beforehand as she promotes her new documentary.
In the near future, cultural influence will matter as much as economic power. Our ability to tell our stories and emotionally connect with audiences is paramount. People long to be moved. We need stories that inspire dreams, offer hope, tales of redemption, sad stories, love stories, and funny stories.
The movie, titled Melania, depicts the First Lady's life during the 20 days leading up to President Trump's second inauguration. The movie highlights her fashion choices, operations surrounding her Secret Service detail, and her role as an advisor to the president. Ahead of the film's theatrical release on January 30th, the president and the First Lady will attend a premiere tomorrow at the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. And NTD's 5th International Photography Competition is in its final round right now, and it has received submissions from all over the world. Its mission? To promote works which focus on luminosity, beauty, and naturalism while strictly following traditional principles and aesthetics. NTD's Flora Hua was there at the exhibition yesterday to learn more from the judges and the contestants about the art of photography. Here's that.
Among the nearly 200 photographs that made it to the final round, what are the determining factors for the competition's judging panel? We tapped Renee Luo, one of the juries of the photography competition, to find out more. Renee Luo from Australia has extensive experience in not only photography, but also oil painting. She has been on the judging panel since the inaugural competition back in 2008.
Competitions organized by NTD are not about money. The scale and presence of this event represents a kind of universal value, NTD's values. What it expresses is something ancient and traditional, the spiritual state of how people once lived calmly, peacefully, and with stability and balance.
Luo said the judging panel has received more and more works matching the core values of the photography competition over the years, especially this year. But where are these core values coming from?
Because everyone's way of thinking is different. Each person's judgment of a work of art is also different. But ultimately, there are universal values shared by all of humanity, and the mission set by this organizing committee is precisely such universal values. It provides a broad direction, positive, uplifting, bright, and kind. When you have compassion, goodness naturally emerges. No one likes darkness, and no one likes coldness. We all need sunlight and warmth.
Besides the theme of the photo, Luo emphasized that a good photographer should always keep in mind the traditional rules of composition.
Photography is essentially a two-dimensional art that evolved from painting. It carries over the aesthetics of painting. So its basic aesthetic standards come from painting. The difference is that it uses modern mechanical tools. What truly sets it apart is its emphasis on light and shadow, using light to paint. So what are universal values? In visual aesthetics, whether in painting or photography, there are standards and rules. Just as a country must have laws to regulate society, an image also needs rules. When you work within these rules, everything flows smoothly. When you ignore them, things become chaotic.
Gina Pottinger said she learned a lot from the judges' insights. As a veteran photographer herself, Pottinger took many photos of people, but she will always ask herself a question.
In the organization that I worked with, we really thought a lot about dignity of the person that we were, if there were people in the photo, would they be proud to see the photo that we took of them? Would they feel good about how we were portraying them? Really just thinking about what is in the environment of the photo and what you focus on can reduce the dignity of the person, or it can elevate the dignity of the person.
Pottinger also shared why she thinks the role of a photographer carries a lot of weight in what they bring to the viewers.
I think we all tend to trust what we see with our eyes, even if we weren't physically there. And the photographer or the videographer has a lot of power to omit part of the image in how they crop the image or how they zoom in on something, what is not inside the frame of the photo. And so just the framing itself is very powerful.
Another photographer from Germany has been taking pictures of sailing races for over 15 years.
I love it to be on the water. It doesn't matter which kind of weather it is, and to catch really the sailing boat and the energy what is on the boat and the emotions the people have on the boat. You can see how they work together. So I now the photo sailing as a team, because you really have to work there on the boat as a team, otherwise it wouldn't function.
Reporting from New York City's Samaguni Club, Flora Hua, NTD News.
Thanks to Flora for that great report. And as the First Lady said in the story just before that, culture does matter indeed. Congrats to everybody involved in the NTD photo competition. The platform grows bigger and bigger every year, and it surely does have the ability to move people. Well, look, if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's a story you'd like to see us cover, shoot us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. We would love your feedback. And for round-the-clock original news coverage, watch us live at ntd.com/live or use our NTD app. Thanks for watching. I'm Carrie Dunst. I'll see you soon. Welcome back to NTD Good Morning. I'm Carrie Dunst. NTD's 5th International Photography Competition is in its final round right now here in New York City, and it's received submissions from all over the world, thousands of them, literally. Our team has gone through them one by one. The mission, to promote works which focus on luminosity, beauty, and naturalism, while following the traditional principles and aesthetics. Now joining us in studio are 2 of the contest finalists, selected again from thousands of entrants. We have Gina Pottinger and James Azier. Thank you so much for joining us. Really, congratulations to have submitted an image. Only 50 or so made it out of, our team went through so many images. Something really spoke to them about your image. So I'd love to start there, Gina. If you could talk about, I know you have 2 images that were finalists. Can you start by talking about Downpour?
Yeah, so my work with an international nonprofit organization took me to West Africa, to the Ivory Coast. And after we documented some work that local people were doing with a health clinic in their community, they wanted to take us to their neighborhood so that we could see where they lived. And so I and the videographer went into this little housing area, and while we were there, there was just a torrential downpour rainstorm, so we were kind of trapped there for a little while. But the kids in the housing area just started dancing and playing in the rain, and they were just kicking soccer balls and just having so much joy. And so we just got out our cameras and started capturing what they were doing. And so that photo I just love that photo because the boy is showing so much awe in his face as he's putting his hand out to capture the rain.
I love that, and it just shows the difference between the child mindset and the adult mindset.
Yes.
Right? 'Cause an adult would say, hey, it's raining,
Yeah.
and I should be sad, I should go indoors.
Yeah.
And here you have a child sort of teaching adults maybe how to approach a situation. I love that, and
Yeah.
it is a beautiful image. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And James, I'd love to learn more about, I don't even know that I can pronounce this appropriately, but it's a beautiful cliffside scene. What is the title of the photo?
So, Rocamadour, it's Miracles on the Cliffside. It's a sight that resonates when you first see it. It's a village on the side of a cliff.
Wow.
Of a mountain that's kind of lost in the forest of France. And to take that picture to really capture, because when you see it, you wonder, why would you build a village that you can't ride a horse to or take a car to, and where there's no immediate water? It's like something strange. So to get that image, I had to go to another mountain to find a place to capture the whole thing, that you could really get the feeling how high up the cliff this village is. And Rocamadour actually starts a cave. And it was a hermit, monastic hermit named Amadou, who found this cave, and he went to live there. They haven't really determined what year that was. Some say it was around the year 70, others say 600. But gradually other hermits, monastic hermits, joined him, and it became a sacred spot. So Rocamadour really changes in the year 1144, when they were kind of cleaning up the site, this cave. It was still just a cave then. And they found a perfectly preserved body of Amadou. And that, people couldn't believe it, and they came to see it, and it was during that time that miracles began taking place. And it became a gathering place. And 22 years later, Louis IX went there before he left First Crusade, which he won. He defeated the Arabs and eventually lost his life, and today he's called Saint Louis, and Amadou is Saint Amadou. But you have a cathedral there of Notre Dame. So this is the site of what you're looking at in this picture, and it kind of speaks to you. It's like, I really want to know more about it.
I find that so interesting because I just liked the photo, and I thought, oh, it's striking without knowing any of the backstory. And then as you introduce the history of it, and you just fall in love with that picture even more. I think what's great about photography is I would love to go there now, but I don't have to go there because the photo exists, and you went there. And I think that's some of the beauty of the photographer's eye. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about your other image that was selected. This one is a very humorous one, of course. It's monkey in a monkey temple.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, my work took me to Nepal, and after I spent some time with the local people and some trainings that they were doing, they wanted to show us a cultural and religious site that was special in their community. And so the name of the temple complex, and I'll try to pronounce it, Swayambhu, I believe, I hope I'm saying it right. But it was just this, up on this hilltop, a gorgeous temple complex with so much beautiful art and architecture. And what just struck me was how it was open to the air, it was open to the sky, and open to these animals. So there's just monkeys all through the complex as pilgrims were going there to worship and to practice their faith. They're just surrounded by nature. And so these monkeys are just kind of everywhere. You have to move around them, and they're part of it. So. Oh, it's such a different culture from what you see here, where maybe you're used to seeing domesticated dogs and cats, and then you go somewhere and it must just feel so alive and somewhat maybe a little intimidating as well to have all the monkeys running around. Yeah. Well, and just to think about how our buildings of worship can tend to be very enclosed to help us narrow our focus and remove distractions. But what I experienced there was how open it is to nature. I love that. I love that. And as we start to talk about your approach and process to photography, James, I'd just like to get a sense of how you pick your subject. Is it sort of whatever hits you, or do you have something
set in mind before you start a session? How do you approach your art?
Photography, in my mind, is the highest level of storytelling. And so if I see something that illuminates, the object is perspective engineering, either from the bird's eye view, looking down on it, could be a landscape, or from the bug's eye view of people doing something. And so Rocamadour obviously is a landscape. But when you take a picture, when I take a picture, especially from the bug's eye view, my goal is I want the person that looks at it to walk away with a picture in their mind. It kind of crystallizes in your mind. You can't forget it. And so they may see it as a scientist, like an archaeologist is digging, and you learn something from the picture about mankind. Or you might see it as an explorer, when you're going, golly, I'll never go there to see that, but this is like showing me the jungle. Or even as a doctor, like in Gina's picture of the child, it's like a great picture. It's the kind of picture I like to take because the little boy is reaching out. And so as a doctor looks at it, he's trying to diagnose what's going on. What's this kid reaching for? You know, what's happening there? And so my approach, you know, and I really like candid shooting the best. That's my greatest love. But it's what the picture brings to the viewer, and hoping that it's good enough that they're rewarded by looking at it.
I love that. And I love that contrast of the bird's eye view versus the bug's eye view. I mean, in one phrase, you really just captured how perspectives can change even within a single frame from just the way that you set up your shot. And to that point, Gina, we all predate digital photography. And the best moment was when you'd get 2 or 3 rolls back because you had no immediacy and you almost didn't even remember the photos that you took. But I think people who predate the digital art maybe have a different appreciation. It's very quick, you know, obviously easy to just whip out your phone and rip off, you know, 20 shots. But I just want to get a sense of how you, having this experience as well as a journalist, how you approach when you're going to do a photo session.
Yeah, it's really, again, my journalistic background really informs and shaped how I started approaching photography. And I can't spend too much time thinking about the technical aspects of the camera and everything. I need to be able to focus on the subject, especially if it's moving, if it's people who are engaged in activities, just being able to capture the moment as it's happening. So it is a lot of just being quick and flexible.
Yeah, I find that regardless of what your occupation is, when you master the basic skills, you can then sort of forget all those things and then really be connected to the moment, and that's really when magic happens. And to that end, it's no surprise to anybody that you have a background as an educator. So how does that play into the way that you approach photography and the value that you find in photography as an educator?
Well, you know, it's kind of a strange story, but I went to the University of Kansas to get my graduate work done, and I was an assistant track coach. And my goal was to become a college track coach. But when I graduated, I just had this instinct that I needed to get out of Dodge, so to speak. And I turned down a very attractive job to go to the jungles in Honduras at the American School. And I went there obviously to teach and coach, which I did. But it was there I met my first camera. And another teacher introduced me to photography. He told me a little bit about it. But when I talk about exploring, you can't imagine what you could see back in 1967 in the jungles of Honduras, because you could even go to places where they hadn't even seen white men before, where you drove through the rivers and you know, you carried a gun with you. And, wow. And there was so much to see, not just the people, but the archaeology, a lot of it. And so that became ingrained in me. So when I went back to the United States a year later, photography remained a big part of my life. And I used the pictures that I took in Honduras as a teaching tool. Because again, like I said before, photos are the best storyteller. And if you, like I taught history, and I often tell stories. If you're you might end up being George Washington. I might change your name, but you're the first president of the United States. But in teaching, when you can use a photograph to bring it back to life, and especially in subjects like world civilization, but even in the law course, there are so many areas where photography really do keep the kids interested, get them involved. Because honestly, the first question I asked every class as a teacher was, how many of you would not take my course if you didn't have to? and almost the entire class always would raise their hand. I said, you gotta be honest, you know? and that made me feel good, because if I got 3 to raise their hand, I thought, whoa, I'm gonna have some fun in here, you know? But it was mostly about making my kids love the subject. Not as much about the dates and everything. I figured they would learn enough, but I want them to walk out of my class so that when they're driving down the road, they might want to stop and read the historical sign that they see. But pictures, I think, played a big role in my 35 years of teaching to get kids interested, and I feel I did that in the classroom, and I had many kids say that. They'd say, Coach, I didn't really think I liked history, but I really enjoyed your class. So,
picture really is worth 1,000 words when it comes to education, right?
And I continue taking pictures all my life. I've been in 5 continents, and I've taken pictures all over the world, and they were very usable in the classroom.
I love that. I love that. And the role of the educator is so central to a thriving society and finding unity in society and what is, you know, important and what is good. And Gina, as we start to finish up, I'd just love to get a little bit of your perspective on this week being with your kind, you know, being around other people who not are only photographers, but were also drawn to enter a contest that maybe values a different set of criteria, you know, with tradition and classic composition and some of the things that NTD from our cultural side is trying to promote.
Yeah, it's so invigorating to be with the other photographers and people that share this passion. Often I'm the only one I know in my social circle or even in my work that is so passionate about photography. Also just to meet, I was so excited about this contest, hoping that I could meet other photographers from around the world, learn from each other, just celebrate what we're passionate about, celebrate these values that this contest was elevating, just to be able to, celebrate our shared creativity that we are given by our Creator, to do that together. And I'm hoping to build some relationships that will last out of this contest.
Such a beautiful way to end the show. Appreciate you both. You've inspired us all. Gina Pottinger, James Azier, thank you so much for coming in, and for congratulations, really, on being selected in the competition.
Appreciate it.
And if you have any feedback on the show, or maybe there's a story you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at goodmorning@ntd.com. We would love your feedback. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Carrie Dunst. We'll see you soon.